So where did our money come from? I've actually got to take you back to the mid-1800s. So take a journey back in history with me. Mid-1800s, Joseph Medill buys into the troubled Chicago Tribune. He does it for two reasons. One, he wants to make money, and two, he wants to create the Republican Party and get Abraham Lincoln elected president. And he was successful with both of those. Now we're going to go on down through the generations. World War I has ended. Returning from World War I are his two grandsons, Colonel McCormick and Captain Patterson, who take over the responsibilities of the Tribune Company. There was only one real difficulty. They were super bright guys, but they had different ideologies. So we had Colonel McCormick, who was a true capitalist, and we had Captain Patterson, who was a quasi-socialist. And can you imagine those editorials that would come out on Sunday and the readers? There was a little bit of confusion about what the newspaper was doing in its business. They were smart guys. They formed a voting trust. McCormick stayed to run the Tribune Company, and over to New York City goes Captain Patterson. Captain Patterson creates the New York Daily News. And if you've ever read that newspaper, tabloid kind of newspaper, a lot of photojournalism, cartoons, stories, and it was made for every man on the subway. Except you know what? It wasn't just made for the men on the subway. Captain Patterson's wife was actually the first female editor at the Chicago Tribune, and she made sure that the New York Daily News, when they started it, had a grade of ink that it would not smudge the ladies' gloves as they read that newspaper. So they were innovators. They were innovators from the start. And let me give you the example. We're in Chicago, we're in New York. Very first radio licenses in both markets. Very first television licenses in both markets. Now let's head on down through the generations. We're in the mid-1970s. The management at the Tribune Company says, innovation, world is changing. Let's invest in this small tech company. Let's put $6 million into it. And in fact, that $6 million investment grew to be $2 billion in worth. We're pretty sure we might exist because of that investment. Oh, and by the way, that investment was in America Online. So this is a company that embraced change as new things were happening. So as we think about where the money for the Patterson Foundation came from, communications, embracing technologies, and innovation, as we look at source of funds. And it's always important to understand in a foundation, where did the money come from, so that we can respect the donor and the values that came from. So how did the foundation get started? So here we are over in New York City. Captain Patterson and his wife Mary and their son Jim lived in Ossining, New York, that's a little bit north of the city. Grand mansion entertained the rich and famous. Across town lived the Clarks. Father Clark, who was a prison guard at Sing Sing. A little bit socioeconomic differences there, but his daughter Dorothy and son Jim eventually fell in love and got married. After Jim returned from West Point, he served in World War II, came back, worked at the New York Daily News, and they retired in the mid-1970s to Sarasota, lived on Longboat Key, very low-key, out on Country Club Shores, if you know where that is. It is not the Jim Patterson who was the mayor. It's not the Jim Patterson who started Red Tide Start. Rather, they were a low-key couple who lived out here. Now it's 1992. Jim passes away. Now we go to 1997. Dorothy starts the Patterson Foundation with $3 million. And she starts the foundation with herself, her attorney, John Berteau, and family friend, Ted Adair. And for 10 years, the three of them made the philanthropic distributions from the Patterson Foundations. So we have that 10 years of history of how Dorothy wrote her checks and what she wanted to do. So in 2007, from 97 to 2007, Dorothy dies in 2007, leaves very generous bequests to her 10 nieces and nephews, did not have children. She and Jim did not have children. And the remainder of her assets went into the Patterson Foundation. So our assets grew to $200 million. And what does that mean? What it means is that in the private endowed charitable foundation world, we are obligated by law to distribute 5% of our assets. It's a complicated formula, but it works out to about 5%. So that means every year Patterson Foundation will be distributing approximately $10 million to accomplish the vision of the foundation.